pleased to have Melissa Mio from Light Oaks introduce our next speaker, and just a personal plug for Melissa. She's also our sponsorship chair on the board this year. So thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Ralph. So for those of you vendors out there that have not become New England HIMSS sponsors, if you have any interest, please contact me, and I do have a team, so if I can't be in touch with you, I have a few people on the team that can talk to you as well. So thanks once again to all the sponsors that provided the tables today and that helped make this event free. And I have the pleasure right now of introducing Scott Margolis. He's a managing partner from Solutionlab. Scott Margolis currently leads the Health Exchange Security and Privacy Compliance Program for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, established to support and meet the goals of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. No one knows what that is, right? ACA. Mr. Margolis has more than 25 years of information technology, security governance, and regulatory compliance experience as an entrepreneur, senior leader, and consultant. He has worked across the healthcare continuum, having worked for payer, consulting, and product organizations. He has successfully managed information technology and security organizations, led large consulting initiatives in both the public and private sectors, and developed products for the commercial marketplace. Mr. Margolis holds a Master's of Business Administration degree in Management Information Science and a BA in Computer and Information Sciences from Temple University. Please give him a warm welcome. Please introduce Scott. Here he is.
So the first thing I'm going to say is, working on a health exchange, don't hold it against me. I'm going to talk neutral about it. I will tell you personally, I do think it's a great thing what this is trying to achieve. And it's, I guess, I didn't plan to say this, but it is symbolic. We're here. I think the roots of HIPAA actually come from Kennedy Kassenbaum, so this is kind of a neat thing to be here. So I'm going to talk about the security process that we went through to get the certification for the exchange. So it's a little bit more heavily weighted towards compliance, but then what really happens after compliance? You know, we're in a world now where we need to think beyond that and look at more of a risk-based approach. We've all heard of things out there where there's breaches. We heard of Target, and it's more than check the box. It's, you know, we need to look at what are the threats that are out there. So just to kind of start off with something interesting, years ago I worked in defense, and this was kind of when the internet wasn't really there, so data moved around in, you know, kind of private networks. Ours might have been part of DARPA. So you had a lot of controls, you had a lab. You know, I went through the clearance process, they interviewed all the wrong people, and that was a whole other thing. But you get cleared, you work in a lab, and then we'd go back to our desks, and we'd work, and we'd do programming, flow charts, sometimes on paper, right, which is a nightmare. And one thing I noticed is with all the good controls, right, people would have stuff on their desk and they'd go home. So one day I asked the security officer, I said, look, you know, I don't want to cause any, you know, problem here, because I was a programmer, and I said, but why do we, you know, we have everything out on our desks. You know, we go in the lab and everything is kind of locked down, but then we leave it on our desks. And the response was, the windows are tinted and nobody can see. And I said, okay, but if you drove by there at night, everybody knows, the windows like this, floor to ceiling, you can see everything on a desk. You know, so it was, to me, it was, you know, maybe that was my calling for security, but it was almost like what we would call an uneven application of controls in an environment. So I'm going to put that out there. You guys kind of think about that a little bit, and then you'll see kind of where this is going, that the exchange and the security around it does follow a framework. Make sure I'm doing this right here. Okay, so I'm showing the limits of my, technical capabilities here. So what we're going to talk about here is the Patient Affordable Care Act. There's two different types of exchanges. There is a state-based exchange type, which we have in Massachusetts, and then there's the other one, which is the federally facilitated exchange, or what we hear of healthcare.gov. There's a certification accreditation process, or the ATC, that you go through to actually, they take this exchange and connect it to the federal hub for data exchange. I'll talk about that. And we all know that all this had to happen by October 1st. So what happens after 10.1? It's the post-10.1 world, where we have monitoring and federal oversight. We have a threat environment and cyber defense. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The role of threat sharing and why that's very important. And then some concluding remarks and Q&A. So again, as the introduction, I'm the founder and managing partner of Solutionlab, which is a healthcare information security company. I led the security and privacy effort for the Commonwealth, for the exchange. There were multiple agencies and multiple parties. What you're hearing in the news, there is a lot of, I would say, agita with all this going on. I've been in systems before I was in security. It will work. Eventually, this will work. So the initiative was the Health Insurance Exchange. My role was security governance and oversight. And again, I would say that my accomplishment on this is that we met that 10.1 objective, that certification objective. I will talk about that, and that was not easy to go through. It was more than check the box. So patient affordable care and the exchanges. Basically what it is there are, it's a marketplace. It's a marketplace, you can think of almost, there's two versions. If you're on public assistance and you need health insurance, it's one door. We don't want you going to a place and having to wait in lines, going somewhere else and waiting more lines. You go in, you put your information, the system comes back and tells you what you're eligible for. If you don't want to go on a subsidized plan and you need to go and get your insurance, you will put some information and get that consumer reports type of view of what are those plans that are available to you. Okay? Again, there are some things that are happening now that they're trying to get that right in a lot of states, but that is the intent of this program. So a health exchange refers to the process of reliable, interoperable, electronic health-related information sharing and eligibility determination conducted in a manner that protects the confidentiality, privacy, and security of the information. All right? So that's very important. So there's a lot going on here to make this happen. We need to know who somebody is. We need to identity proof them. You walk in, or you go to your computer and you log in. We need to confirm that John Smith is John Smith. We have to make sure it's not John Smith pretending to be Mary Adams down the hall, 75 years old. Okay, so that is the whole thing that happens here, and there's multiple steps along the way to verify that information. Again, there's the federally funded or facilitated exchange, which is like you think of healthcare.gov. That means that people connect to that directly, or there is an exchange component within the state that interacts with that federally managed system. The one that I think that is more complex, which we do here in Massachusetts, is a state-based exchange. That's a system here that it has a portal, you go to it, and in real time is exchanging information with a federal system called the Hub. I'm not going to go through all of this, and it's probably very hard to see from where you're sitting, but across the top there are some roles. We have individuals, anybody wants to get insurance. We have navigators that assist others. We have employers that are doing this on behalf of employees. We have brokers. We have employees, customer service administrators. As a security person, I look at this and it's a horror show for me, because I look at it and I imagine people going to Starbucks and trying to do this, and that's the reality of it. You will have people that are mobile, that are going with a laptop, connecting into the exchange and trying to help other people get these services. So from a security perspective, we need to lock this down and we need to make sure that it's done correctly. We look at, not to go too deep into technology, a lot of us go to things like Gmail and we log in. Some of us go to other systems where we actually have a little token or a little number that comes to our phone and multi-factor authentication. So those are the controls that are put in place to really confirm identity of users and of people that are using the system. So again, this picture shows that there's a lot of interoperability. That's a key term here. We have the exchange. We have state systems that are there now today, like Medicaid and Medicare. Manu Tandon, who just spoke, talked a lot about what's going on in the state. There's an interface, there's connectivity and glue between all those systems. We have federal systems, and we also have carrier systems, like the health plans, for example, in New England. So this is some of the functionality and what happens behind the scenes. A consumer logs in into the exchange website and they browse. They go on just like you would go to bestbuy.com and look to see what you want before you actually go and do a shopping cart. Okay? There's an online application submission. That's where you go and you put your information, you put your dependents. If you try to not put truthful information, the system hopefully goes and validates that against some of the sources, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then if there's financial assistance required, there's some other things that kick in, other state programs or business rules that happen. And then there's basically a procedure to go through to enrollment. A lot of people on the technical side of this, or even the business, will look at it and say, if we're connecting to all these sources, why didn't the government do it in a certain way to kind of make it more transparent to the states? And the reason why that is every state has slightly different rules on how they grant healthcare coverage to its population. So it's more of making sure the states have control over that, which is how we've been historically in this country, and also to allow that flexibility when we are imposing something like this across the nation. So that's where that flexibility comes in of, we will give you the data, your interpretation of greater than, less than, 10%, 20% is done at the state level. On the right-hand side, again, just anonymous browsing until you go to account creation. Okay, and that again is that paradigm of, I'm going to shop at a website. Identity proofing and verification. You put information in, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. And then there's that eligibility determination of, if you put in $300,000 a year, you might not get on public assistance. There's some thresholds there. The exchange data sources, which I'll talk about for a second, and I haven't put that triangle in the corner. That's our confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and that's the cornerstone of all information security. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid mandate that the health insurance exchanges must perform business functions which require real-time data from federal sources. So the way we do that is we want to verify income, Internal Revenue Service, or the state's revenue offices. We want to verify that you're not a prisoner. We go against incarceration data. We make sure that you're not on certain lists. There may be outreach to Homeland Security. It all happens in real time with different types of web services. So from a security perspective, the control between the state and that behind the scenes real-time outreach has to be very secure. If you heard of the previous presenter, he also talked about, there's that real-time data exchange that has to happen, and it's mission critical to happen very quickly to make sure that if someone comes to the site, they put some information in. If they're not putting the right information and maybe the system says, did you own a 1980 Pinto? If yes, they kind of get a little close. You've all done that where it tries to identify who you are. These systems do that type of thing to identity proof. I would say that the validation of last resort is somebody would have to submit physical proof if there's nothing that can be found. We want to make sure that we don't have cases of fraud, and I'll talk about that in a few moments, of things that are symptoms of that crop up that sometimes are innocent, other times are people trying to do some interesting stuff. It's protected health information under HIPAA, personally identifiable information, which is beyond HIPAA. It's mass data breach law, and then we have federal tax information. I can tell you that in working through this, that is the data that has the most angst with it. The federal tax information, that is your salary, that's your filing status with the Internal Revenue Service. And we've actually been in conversations where we hear from the IRS, you do what you want with everything else, this is what we care about. We care about the controls and where's our data. So again, I'm not going to go through this diagram, but I really want to show you that there's a lot of connected parts. There's a lot of interoperability happening here. On the right-hand side, it's a state-based exchange at the top. That Federal Data Services Hub is that component in the middle that we bump up against to validate identity and get income and all that other information. And then the one at the bottom is showing more of what we call that federally facilitated exchange, where it's more of people relying on that centralized service. There's funding implications for why people did their own exchanges. There's prestige, grants. There's a variety of reasons why states have elected to go in different directions. Some are political as well. And basically what I wrote here is interoperability can lead to risk. So from an IT perspective, I love all this stuff. Okay, that's where I live in my geekdom. But when you look at the security perspective, this is where we can get into trouble. Think about it, if one piece of this isn't right, somebody could be firing off these calls from a remote location and getting back that personally identifiable information and then using that to get credit cards somewhere. So we have to make sure that the people that are calling the hub are the exchanges out there that are authorized and have certificates to call that exchange source. So the certification accreditation process, I think this is interesting. If you fall asleep through a lot of what I talk about, this is something you really can take back with you. And the reason why is information security to some people is like selling insurance. A lot of us, it's like group therapy for a lot of us. We call each other and say, I need to do this, and the CEO doesn't really care about it. How did you get it convinced? What did you have to do? And the problem with security is it's not always specific in the commercial environment. We had a mandate that we had to do it. It was funded. So from a security perspective, we had to do this. If I didn't do this, I'd probably run out of town. So what we look at is there's a lot of laws and regulations that wrap around this, and it gets overwhelming. It's almost like you decide that you're going to go and build onto your house yourself, and there's a lot of standards. So, standards for electrical wiring, plumbing, insulation, roofing materials, and carpeting, and all that stuff can get overwhelming for someone who doesn't know all that. So the federal government realized that that was a big problem. Some of you out there have heard of the NIST standards or the ISO standards. There's stuff in between. So some of these here, we have FISMA, Federal Information Security Management Act, HIPAA, the HITECH Act, Privacy Act of 1974, E-Government Act of 2002. Then we have the ACA 2010. We have safeguards protecting federal tax returns. That's our IRS 1075. And then we had the mass data breach laws in the Commonwealth here. So that got a little overwhelming. The federal government uses the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, or NIST. So they said, we're going to do it through NIST. We've got to figure out how we're going to do it. And we have other things out there like the IRS 1075, FIPS 199/200 for certain things about encryption controls. And then we have FICAM, which again, identity proofing, and the one on the right. Now this is where it gets a little interesting. We're used to hosting in brick and mortar environments, but people are going to cloud and virtualization. It's cheaper, it's scalable, it's reliable, and it can be secured appropriately. So the government came up with a standard called FedRAMP that actually looks at cloud service controls. So the government recognizes that they have a problem. They came up with the Harmonized Security and Privacy Framework. They said, let's package it all together. So we're going to base everything on NIST 800.53 for securing federal information systems. And that has basically management controls, policies, oversight governance, operational controls. How do you do things a little bit more tactically in the company, like provisioning access, controlling laptops and user devices, mobile, bring your own technology. And then the technology piece itself. How do we build this? How do we encrypt? How do we store and do it the right way so we don't lose our data? And again, it's all focused on protecting the data by law and not losing public trust. That's a key thing, because whenever we screw up, Boston Globe and everybody else is waiting for us. Right? We've all seen articles, probably 4 times a week. My joke is I'm hoping that we're going to get our own section. It would be kind of interesting. The focus on security and privacy topics, these are 9 of them, but there's more. It's system and data classification, security controls, identity, credential, and access management, a secure infrastructure, data encryption, audit trails, continuity of operations, compliance, oversight, and privacy. So when you look at this mix, it's covering a lot of areas, but they want to make sure that they're prescriptive in all areas. Like my example, when I worked in defense, they were really good, but they didn't think that physical and environmental, maybe we don't want to put desks up against floor-to-ceiling windows. We loved working there, but a lot of people didn't know. And we had a lot of people that would, unfortunately, leave something open on their desk. And you have to think that now with insider threat, maybe 1% of them were doing it intentionally, because sometimes we did find interesting cars in a parking lot and we'd have to report that. So again, these are the topics that we want to be prescriptive so people know what they have to do in order to become compliant with them. The one thing I will say is we are what we call moderate. We're classified as moderate, with the data that we have. Now that might sound interesting, being it's healthcare data, income data, person identifiable information. It's regarded as moderate. We recognize the fact that harm could come to somebody if information is tampered with, but we're not high. We're not dealing with missile silos, pandemic, and stuff in a laboratory. So that's where the federal government has put us, into that moderate level of controls. So to get a little bit more specific, they came up with a framework, and the framework had harmonized security and privacy framework of kind of overall, what is the security going to look like? Then they had guidance for each, for the states on how they need to do this. They need to stand up the program, they need to have a leader, they needed to have policies, procedures, and then they had to show evidence of the controls periodically to the federal government. And then there was a minimum set of security controls that every state had to comply with. So if you look at that NIST, I think it's got like 300 plus controls. There are controls in there that they said you definitely have to do these. These maybe aren't as important. So it gets, again, more prescriptive. And then there's risk standards. There's a life cycle process, almost like an SDLC. And then there's an architecture, which is called MITA, or the Medicaid Information Technology Architecture. And there was oversight to that through different phase gates of this program. So if you think about it from a commercial perspective, if you're an information security and privacy professional, you could take this because it is freely available, it's tax funded, and you could implement this in a company, but carefully only pull what you really need. Because if you go out and embark on a one-year program in corporate America, you're going to be on LinkedIn all the time looking for your next thing, right? There's a balance there between appropriate level of controls, the environment, and risk, and where the risk is on those assets. And fortunately, we knew our risks were on the exchange and the people that managed it. And then, so there's some things here about some procedures that we need to follow. There was a system security plan that was from CMS, a safeguard procedures report from IRS. There was a risk assessment, contingency planning procedures, and then these, what they call like information security agreements or data use agreements that all had to be completed. And they gave templates for that. They gave templates and due dates. The thing that I did with this that was a little bit different, because we were all doing this for the first time, is I said, like, it's almost like when you're younger, you love to be able to give an exam to your teacher and say, could you grade it, but don't put it in the book, and if I screw it up, I want to have a chance to fix it. And CMS and IRS, because they were all in the same boat, they kind of liked that. They could get the work a little bit early, grade it, go over it, and come back. So we did that with 3 iterations. It was an iterative approach that we'd submit it, they'd tell us where we messed up, where we were good, and we would kind of work through it that way. I can tell you that it created a lot of back-channel communication, right? Because if you submit something and 10% of it is not good, that gets out, and people start to get concerned, and we have to spend 4 days explaining why we followed that process, and everybody kind of settles down and takes less caffeine. So we did have these are deliverables real quick. Again, it was a system security plan, NIST-based, safeguard procedures report, NIST-based. We did on-site site inspections. We did the risk assessment, contingency plans, interconnection security agreements. We did a privacy assessment. We did code review results, and we have what is called a POEM. How many of you have heard of that process? A plan of action milestones. Okay, it's a risk register. It's a risk register that you identify all the bad stuff. It's like Vegas inside the company, and these are things that we need to fix to align and make sure that we're not going to end up in the news. And then what we do is we do all that, and we ended up with an authority to connect. So we actually would do walkthroughs of data centers, and it's fascinating if you've ever gone through any of these facilities. They are tightly controlled. They have a thing called a man trap where you walk into one room, the door closes behind you, and then the other one opens. And I remember asking some questions about where they store fuel to keep the generators. Could somebody get in there? And I'd get this look like, no. And you'd look outside, and it'd be like barbed wired fence curved inward. I mean, it looked really well protected. So we had to check the box, if you will, documentation, and we also had to do physical reviews, which is a little bit different than a lot of people do in companies. So we made it. On 10/1 we did. I'll tell you the truth, it was like getting the assignment in right before it was due. I think it was September 26th or 27th that we actually got to the point where we were certified. And it was that way for every state that got approved. And it was very deep. We had people that showed up that were to do the review, and they would ask questions like, on this server, on this port, when did you configure it this way? You know, they were very deep. It wasn't just like, oh, you have a server in a secure room, okay, well, we're good. It got very deep. And we had to bring in a lot of people. We had to fly people in. I had to have a panel of people, because I don't know all these things. I only know certain things that were kind of within my domain. So we achieved all that, which again, here are some of the things, you know, we had a lot of interviews with stakeholders. One thing I'll say is that we had some complexities here. Some states have like one organization, they're doing their exchange, and the security area and the technology area. We had 4 agencies, we had multiple vendors. Our hosting was done at another cloud service provider. So you can imagine doing an assessment where you ask a question times 4. Okay, you got 300 controls. So after 10.1, the exchange is running, or parts of it, as you may have heard. But from a security perspective, as good or as bad as it is, we're still using dangerous live data in this environment, and we need to protect it. And after that party's over that one day, everybody's like, okay, put the beer down. And we need to see what you're doing now that you're actually live. Data's coming back into the system. It's going into the repository. Are you monitoring it? What's going on? And you hear things that everybody hears in organizations like, I have developers out there and they need to look at this and they want to do this, or we have someone troubleshooting. And whenever we have someone who needs access to production, we have to let the IRS know that. We have to go through a 45-day period. We have to do background checks. They can't be offshore. There's a lot of things that need to happen. And the government, they kind of got their things in order very quickly, and then they start to want to know what's going on. So basically what they do is they establish a triennial audit program where they validate 1/3 of the controls annually. They submit we submit a security activity report of any changes to both CMS and IRS. And we perform a third-party audit every 3 years. We do vulnerability assessments continuously. They're quarterly app scans and periodic penetration tests. That's where people look to try to do the bad things and then let us know what's weak. We mitigate the scan and penetration results, and we put them again in that plan of action milestones, or that risk register, POEM. And we submit the results in corrective action. And we also do a security impact assessment I call active document. People are coming up with new ideas all the time. Like my previous speaker was saying about, you know, the whole thing with the highway, moving data. Okay, that's great. That's improved access and care, but that's another hook into a system where we have very sensitive data. We now need to protect that and consider that in the life cycle. The challenge that we run into in my role is, hey, we thought you guys were done on 10.1. What are you doing here? Go back to your cubicle, right? Because people were like, they thought, we've got that certificate and now we should be done, but we're not. I can tell you that this is where it started, but it has since changed. Okay, because this has been in the media, there was a House Oversight Committee recently, I think Massachusetts was called into that. There is increased scrutiny and increased control around the environment from our federal partners. So, you know, we've had more, I would say, invasive audits of what we're doing, but I would say in a very different way, which I'll talk about in a second. So that federal oversight, they look at things like incident reporting, that we're submitting our risk register, our POEM. They're doing site visits, they're verifying controls, and they're looking at our documentation revisions. So if we put something in a control, they actually will call and say, could you send us the log that comes out of that? You say that you guys monitor something every day. Could you send us the log? And you can't tell them no. The interesting thing that happened here is, so we just recently hosted a visit from the IRS. And it wasn't for me personally, it was for the exchange. And when they come in, with any audit, if you've ever been through it, everybody's kind of sitting there and nervous. And there's a process that you go through, and there's a checklist. And the thing that we noticed, even partway through the first days, they kept saying to us, we're here to work with you. And we're like, sure. You know, but that kept coming up, that theme. And we would show them something, and they would say, that's good, but we'd also want to see this. And we'd get the other document. You know, they were very patient. And they would say, good. If you put that thing in this document over here, you're good to go. And then they would explain to us why they wanted that. They said, you know, if somebody has a problem, they need to know who to call. And we know that they call in the state that, you know, if there's a problem, if there's an incident, you just need to make sure you put that stuff together. But we're good with what you have. Just let us know that you're putting it together. And that's different than, you know, getting the flunking grade. Okay, so obviously, that's where I kind of toot my own horn. If we had problems, they would shut us down. Okay, because the worst thing they want to do is allow the exchange to operate if there's a gap. It's not going to look good. Okay, so again, it gets political beyond security at that point. So they are very careful to look at everything. I can tell you that in these audits, they are looking at things about how Linux is configured, how Windows is used, what operating systems, software. It's different than we've ever expected. They are very technical and very deep, and they will look for the mitigation. So it gives you comfort at night to know that somebody's doing the right thing, but they're working with you to educate you. So I'm going to kind of go quickly here on some of this to talk to you about where do we see the threat landscape. So the health exchanges contain very sensitive data. Cyber attacks are increasing in their sophistication. It's going beyond our borders. It's nation states. It's organized crime. It's not the teenager in an apartment anymore like, you know, we used to hear years ago. So nation states and criminal communities actually share the data. There are people that produce technology to breach other technologies, and they sell it in a black market. It's a different type of software company, I guess. You get the current defensive strategies in the companies aren't working anymore, okay, unless you're evolving. You know, the zero-day patch of, oh, okay, we got a problem with Internet Explorer, so we're not going to use it, and everybody's going to be safe today. Well, that's okay, but then they're going to come in through Adobe or another vector in the company, and they're going to get it. Okay, these things are very sophisticated, and we need to be prepared for them. So the point solutions are one solution for one area. It just doesn't work. And then the cost of the healthcare industry for these things is going up. Okay, the only benefit is someone like me has more opportunity to go out there and try to get people to kind of increase their controls and be an evangelist with this. So there's some perceptions. Again, I want to highlight perceptions. If you guys don't know these sources, one of them is the Ponemon Institute. They put a report out. I think these presentations are made available to you guys. You should look at that. There's another one called the Verizon Data Breach Report that comes out annually. And they talk about all the things that are happening. Some of these reports are sponsored by vendors who are also vested in security, so just keep that in the back of your mind. However, the information that they aggregate, such as Verizon, is because they have data centers, I think, in most of the world. So they actually get this information. But the perception is that the exchanges are insecure, and people are going to be putting their data into a place that's not secure and it's going to get breached. Or databases are not being locked down the way they should. Or people are worried about their registration is not going to be happening through a secure website, and they're going to hit send, and it's going to go to somebody else that is not intended to go to. What is stolen? Not from exchanges, but in general from healthcare. I have to preface that. Billing and insurance information, medical files, payment details, scheduling information, monthly statements, and prescription details. So if I go to an endodontist, does root canals, and all you know is that I go to an endodontist, you don't even know what my treatment is, you can infer that I must have trouble with my gums. Maybe I have a tooth that needs a root canal. Right? So it's by affiliation or association that conditions can be known, and that's why scheduling information, for example, could be a risky thing that we would not want to get out there. Okay? Jocelyn, for diabetes. People go to Jocelyn, probably go for something related to the endocrine system. So again, that's linking a person with a health condition. So those are things that we have to think about in our role to protect and separate data elements. So I'm not going to go through in detail here, but most of the threats happen from outside, but the insider threat is also a thing. There are people in the organization that are there to get information for other purposes, unfortunately. We also have bring your own technology. That's the thing that's growing in popularity. iPhones, tablets, people bring them into the company. And there's sometimes a gray area where data from work, data from personal life is on that same device. Some people use technologies that kind of encapsulate that and keep it separate. The problem is that sometimes there's a crossover where people email things from one area to another. People try to send things to Google and Yahoo from the work email. They think I'm going to need this at night, and with all good intent, but they're putting people and themselves at risk. for doing that. So the threat environment, what we did is, for any good risk management program, we also followed NIST 800.30, which is another NIST standard. We looked at kind of where the core areas are for risk. We looked at there's the adversarial, those are the people that are outside. We looked at accidental, which is very frequent, people sending things to the wrong place. Structural, which is software and operating systems. We have concerns over the legal and public trust, what could happen. In the ACA, if somebody can't get a service, they can get an attorney and they can sue rightfully so to say, hey, I wasn't able to get insurance. And then we have compliance requirements and operational. So in my world, I kind of look at the aggregate things that go on in our state, and just like other states, I look at, okay, we've had trouble with software. Federal government has had trouble with software. Whenever you have a lot of people trying to fix things very quickly, you expose yourself to risk. You have developers and different people trying to do the right thing. They work very late, drinking Red Bull or whatever. I've been in that world. And sometimes you make a mistake. And that's where these things happen. So you kind of bump that up a little bit in your risk profile when you're scoring risks. One thing that I'll say before I do this is, the one thing that we all talk about when working this is security, yes, privacy, yes, it's very important, but the last thing we want to do is block anybody from accessing a service. So one of the cornerstone things that happens here is if somebody comes in and it can't be identity proofed or there's some issue, they are moved into certain programs. So to make sure that they are not waiting with a medical condition while we try to straighten ourselves out. And that's a continual discussion. So this thing here that I put up here is, this again is from the Verizon Data Breach Report. I think it comes out in May or June of every year. 92% of it, my eyes are getting not good, it's done by outsiders. These don't total 100% because they come from different sources. So I wanted to say that right up front. Everybody asked that. And then 14% is from the inside. So the three things that I put at the top are something to think about, and I'll give you an example. So data is stolen for other purposes. They get this information, maybe they go out and try to get credit cards or information elsewhere. Data is stolen as part of a complex multi-phased attack. Again, they're getting information from one place to go to another place. You guys remember there was the Lockheed Martin thing that happened a few years ago with RSA? Multiple areas, multiple vectors to get the information that they wanted. And then the last one is something that's more of the Tom Clancy scenario, which I think it's becoming a little bit more recognized. You look at extortion or coercion and national security risk scenario. And what we think about that is somebody could be on a health plan somewhere in the country who could be a relative of a military leader or a political official. Somebody overseas could get wind of that, get that information, or domestically, and use that to blackmail somebody, and it could actually change military or political strategy because of that type of blackmail. So that type of information has to be protected. We've looked at things that, we have domestic and we have offshore support organizations. Okay, again, I think 99.99% of them are very good and they're doing what they're intended to do. But somebody could get a job there and remote into an environment that they're supposed to support. And if somebody is storing something on their computer, like at a health plan, they could get that information. So that's something to think about. It's kind of a back channel way somebody can come in. We think about that because that's an end user device and that's another threat vector for us. So if you think about the, okay, so you're still awake with me. We started more like certification, check the box, assessments. Now we're moving towards some of those things that really are happening and are reported in the media. So we look at the cyber defense, we do training and awareness, and we make it real. We don't talk about somebody, leaving the folder on the desk anymore. We talk about somebody picking up a thumb drive or getting a thumb drive that they don't know where it came from, and there could be something else on it. Privileged access controls and revalidation. Is the person still on the project? Do they need access to the database? Those types of things. Vendor was in here the other day fixing our Exchange server. They're no longer here. Can we cut off their access so they don't remote in and look at our email? Configuration management, making sure that we are configuring our servers appropriately or any other devices, and it's consistent in the organization. Network activity monitoring, looking for bad things that are happening. Appropriate incident management and rapid response, doing tabletops or tests of that with people in the room. Log management, analysis, and a SIM is where you integrate all those logs and you look for patterns. You get symptoms in different places in the organization, but putting it all together, it builds a pattern, maybe a fraud or some type of abusive activity. Call center activity, I mentioned a little bit earlier. Sometimes people are calling in and complaining they can't do something, and that could be married up with other activity, either by an employee or something in the system where they're actually doing some type of crime, and then getting somebody either who's inside the call center or who's innocent to do something for them to get them further in the process to getting with that kind of payload that they're looking to get. Site usage pattern, user behavior, outside, inside, making sure coding is done securely. We do frequent vulnerability and penetration tests. And then again, if you want another good source, the SAN security controls, again, freely available. There's some countermeasures that we look at, and I highlighted the 3 in red. Threat sharing, which I'll talk about for just another minute, is the key. Okay, it's where you come clean and talk to other people in a trusted environment to save time, save money, and then you find the patterns that everybody's experiencing, either in the industry or across a broader spectrum. Focus on faster detection. It is said that the Lockheed event that happened a few years ago with the RSA, I think it was detected in about 45 minutes, and they notified the Fed. It would have taken most companies 6 months to identify that, and the bad guys would have been gone by that. So having the ability to rapidly detect is very important. And then measure events. Every company is different. It's kind of like our own bodies. Like, somebody's temperature in the low 90s is normal for them, and another person, they would be in ICU, right? But any deviation from that normal thing is where there's a problem. A company will have a certain vector or pattern that is indicative of health, of transactions, processing, user behavior using the system, and deviation from that profile might indicate that there's something wrong. Your network level might be here and all of a sudden it spikes because the bad guys are trying to take something out of your environment. Somebody should be able to detect that. So there are federal governments that are involved. There's CERT, there's Department of Homeland Security, and also CMS, IRS, and MITRE, if you've heard of those. So the role of threat sharing, if you have people looking for bad things, it could take them a long time. If you have a lot of people doing that, you kind of speed up this process a little bit. When you get the people together that are doing this every day, they can compare notes, they can say what they did, and it helps the collective group, doesn't it? It's a weird thing when you think about it that competing organizations could be in the same room, but they do it because it's better for them to work on this together. The benefit outweighs, I want to say, that embarrassment factor, if you will. So it provides routine rapid exchange of information. It's a force multiplier. All members of information sharing partnerships benefit. The members serve as consumers and providers. Contributing even something small helps other people, and expands information collection analysis, like, it could be fold, when you have multiple people doing this. There's a little philosophical thing that people say. It's almost like what happened during like World War II, cyber brigade, not cyber brigades, but brigades to kind of look for suspicious activity during World War II. You think ahead to like vigilance, post 9/11, more people looking for things, hopefully can prevent something. There are 2 different types of threat sharing organizations that are really kind of known out there. There's the industry-specific, or ISACs, focused in one industry, transportation or utilities, finance, healthcare. And then you have cross-sector, which is, they look at, multiple organizations coming together. I'm actually part of one of those. And what they say is, if there's something happening with payment card information, that could impact healthcare, that can impact retail. So they kind of come together to look at the whole life cycle of business. There's advantages and disadvantages. In summary, it's a big data problem, right? There's a lot of information to go through. There's that whole thing again about, do I really want to come clean with what's happening to me at Tufts when my competitor, Blue Cross, might want to use that information and do something with it. But people they're getting beyond that. This is the way to go. There's increased government focus and commitment. People understand it more than they did in the past. And I will say that the most recent legislation is in February 2013. The White House had an executive order to establish this cybersecurity framework. There are things that we hear in the news every once in a while where they're trying to pinpoint, was it a glitch in a system? Was it somebody outside trying to do something? that's kind of the world that we live in now. You know, are there intentional things happening to our infrastructure, or are they just kind of aging infrastructure? There's a thing called the kill chain. Looking at how bad things happen, the good guys actually think like the bad guys and try to replay it and understand how something happens. And the kill chain is it's a multi-phase approach that people use to do these bad things, and the good guys use to try to identify what it is and stop it. So if you think about this, and we're getting to the conclusion, I promise, you look at that, we prevent things. We always try to detect and prevent things. There's a mindset that's now happening where people are saying that we want to preemptively stop things. So that is, do we go out and we know that in an organization or in the public, 1 million computers haven't been patched. They're running XP and we're going to be vulnerable as a nation. Let's send something out that takes them off the network and let them deal with it. Right? There's some mindset like that out there now. The challenges with this is, again, big data problem with sharing. It takes substantial human capital to actually get this working. Business strategy, again, we're talking with competitors. Do we really want to come clean? Communications, again, there's technology limitations. Who's going to fund it? Who's going to host it? And then the one on the lower left-hand corner, Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, as most people call it. Organizations and the government have to work together on this, and they know that, and they already work together. I've been in organizations where they get tipped off by something, and they stop it before it becomes in the media, and it happens in the, in the state government as well. Well, that could be discoverable under FOIA, under the Freedom of Information Act, and the techniques, the tools, the procedures that were used to prevent and detect is maybe something we don't want public, because the bad guys will then work around that the next time. It's like pest control. So basically, it's a continued evolution of compliance mandates. So for the exchange, I kind of went off a little bit here. We are now thinking about threats. We're now thinking about countermeasures, threat sharing. It's beyond check the box. Expanded government oversight. We're having more visitors. Continued engagement and support from the federal agencies. Again, like I said about that IRS audit, they were more engaging and supportive. Increased reliance on a risk-based approach rather than just compliance. Looking beyond point solutions. Movement towards greater threat sharing and multi-state collaboration. And then expanding the role of data analysis and aggregation, moving in some technology, and knowing your threat environment. So, a little long there, a lot of topics, but I'll open it up to some questions or comments. I know it's late in the day. Okay. Oh,
I have
sure.
a question. Sorry. You didn't cover this at all because it may be a little off topic, but I have seen some of these online, web-based compliance tools. What do you think of those in terms of, oh, I'm sorry, I'm asking you the wrong question. You're talking about the health exchange, right?
But
Yeah.
that's actually a good question.
Okay.
Very good. I mean,
Well,
they're all good questions.
thank you for saying
I shouldn't say that. I mean, every question is good. And again, I encourage you guys to ask any questions. As part of, some of the tools are very good. In one of our meetings, we had to prepare for the federal audit, another federal audit. So they prepare you what they want on the table when they come in. And they give you these things that talk about what they're going to test when they came in. A gentleman on our project said, let's go out and get Secular Prime, because they're using Secular Prime. Downloaded a free version and used it, and upped the compliance rating of those things. And it was actually okay, because that tool made those corrections. It wasn't just smoke and mirrors. So some of the tools are very good. I would say that you want to do a little bit of background information on the tools when you look at them. You want to look at who's involved in producing the compliance rules within the tool. They don't necessarily have to be certified, but they have to have the experience to know what is required for HIPAA, Mass Data Breach Law, PCI, EU, Safe Harbor, all those things that you might be looking at. And usually, you want to make sure that there's some kind of evaluation period that someone can kind of look over the shoulder, or if you know yourself, you look at it and you say, gee, I know that access control in this looks a little bit more expansive than what this tool is showing me. So, because you don't want to put your trust in something and use something report that to a CEO of a company that we're good, and all of a sudden you get a finding. So there needs to be a little due diligence when you look into some of those tools.
I have used one in the past, and I thought it was actually pretty good.
Excellent.
Great.
Yeah, there are some that are very good. Yeah.
Any heartbleed war stories?
We were aware of it, I would say about a day before it became mainstream. A colleague of mine operates in kind of that bad space, but he doesn't do bad things. It's his job to kind of keep his ear to it. He told me about it, and at first, honestly, I thought it was a joke. And I told him to break up with her. He sent an emoticon, it was a broken heart, and then described it, and I called him. So I can tell you that the federal government, and this is very, very good, said if you do not show that you've mitigated this by Friday at 3 p.m., we will pull the plug on the exchange. And they were looking for evidence. We worked together. We looked at kind of the scope of all the systems involved. We created a quick action plan. We went out there. We made sure that not only did they do the patch, but they rebooted, they reissued credentials, because there was kind of like this in-between thing that people thought they were done, but they weren't really done. They had to reissue credentials and certificates. So that was all done. We finished it a day ahead of schedule, and we got our blessing. So a lot of stress and some late nights for a couple of days. Anything else? Well, I think I want to thank you, and I think the presentations are made available. My information is here. If you need to get in touch with me with any questions, and please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thanks. Thank you.
So as Scott said, the presentations will be available on the New England Hidden's website, which reminds me, I want to thank the communications team for a lot of the work they've done to announce this event and some other things, but you may have also noticed that we've been tape video recording the presentations.
Oh.
We did the same thing at the New Hampshire event last fall. We did the same thing in the Northern Maine event, and all of those are available on the YouTube channel, thanks to the communications team. Evaluation forms. Hopefully you picked those up when you came in. Please leave us feedback on the program. I'm biased. I think it was a great program today. I hope you felt that way too. But please leave us the feedback. I want to thank our sponsors. Again, this year we've been able to do 3 of these regional events at no charge, and that is largely because of the great support we get from our sponsors. In particular, the ones that are here today, the premier sponsors, Leidos, Informatica, Beacon Partners, HSM Consulting, Oxford, CDW, and BCE. We had the event sponsored today, Exand. We have corporate sponsors, the Atlantic Associates, Queen Associates, Wolf & Company, Iatrix, DataWatch, Cryptic, PC Connection, and also we have our networking sponsor, Hitachi, who's here today. So thank you very much. Now Melissa Mio from Leidos is going to come up, and she's going to coordinate the moment we've all been waiting for, is the drawings for the from the vendors. Oh, and one last reminder, the library is open for everybody at no charge till 5 o'clock today, so please make sure you take advantage of that as well. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Ralph. So for those of you sponsors who have raffle giveaways, if you could come up with the prize winner and also the prize if you have it. I know not everybody has that, but you could coordinate with the winner. I am helping Nicole from PC Connection because unfortunately she has a head cold and I'm recovering from one. I feel like a walking cesspool, so I understand that you don't want to talk. So she has a lovely Dell tablet to give away. So from PC Connection, our corporate sponsor, and the winner of this is Brian Muir from Boston Children's Hospital. So Brian. Congratulations. Okay, and from Leidos Health, we have one of these Vivo Fits. Our company gave this to us, all our employees. I think it's a hint, like, can you get in shape? Get in shape. How much walking are you doing? So the winner of this is Jeff Fallon from Boston Medical Center. Oh, Jeff, you don't need it though, you're already in shape. And I'm gonna have Christina from CDW next.
You go ahead.
Okay, congratulations.
Hi, everybody. Is Jennifer Farisi here? Am I saying that right? Jennifer Farisi? No? She's the lucky winner of our Target gift card, so thank you very much.
Nancy Flanagan from HSM is going to announce.
Thank you, and I'm going to apologize in advance because I think I'm going to mispronounce this name, so I do apologize. But Miss Odile Romanek?
I didn't know. Good. Well, congratulations. Enjoy.
We're making a little change. So we have a gift card of Julia from Iatric Systems. We have a gift card from Best Buy for Patrick Broughton from Greater Lawrence.
Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Youngberg with Hitachi Data Systems, and we have a $100 Visa gift card that goes to Pamela Varhal.
Hi, this is Scott Marshall from BCE, and a fit band for Paula Hernanazi from Boston Medical Center.
It looks like you're going to be getting fit over at BMC.
So we have a double winner, because I hope you're here. I know you're here. So Jeff, come up again, or my son will be willing to. We have an iPad made, Brian Castleton from Cryptic. So Jeff, congratulations.
Jeff, you need to go get a lottery ticket. Get a lottery
Today is your
ticket.
day. Go play the numbers. Congratulations. An iPad made for Jeff. So.
And another double winner is Odile Romanek. $100 Best Buy gift card.
This concludes our event today. Enjoy the lovely Friday weather we have here in Boston. And for those of you who want to check out the museum, go right ahead. Thanks.